So let's start our first panel discussion, and a lot of the things I wanted actually to mention in my introductory speech have been mentioned by Mr. Ambassador and by the head of NACP, which is good because this means that we are like-minded people and that we all understand the importance of the topic mentioned as the topic of our first panel discussion. Maybe it seems to you that the topic of integrity is too global. Good governance, integrity, anti-corruption is too global for a regional forum, which the Open Zakarpattia is. But at the Institute for Central European Strategy, and by saying we, I mean that though I am the first deputy of the Zakarpattia Regional State Administration, but I'm also the co-founder of the Institute for Central European Strategy, so I can really say we. So we in the Institute for Central European Strategy do think that this topic, well, maybe I'm going to use too harsh words, too pragmatic words, but this topic is to help our region. It has to make our region more competitive. That's why we are now trying to implement the project mentioned by Mr. Ambassador. And by the way, we are very much grateful to the Kingdom of Netherlands for this project. So we are implementing a regional project related to integrity, and thus we are developing our skills, gaining new knowledge, borrowing the experience from our Slovakian partners who are engaged in the project in order to build here in Zakarpattia region a better anti-corruption infrastructure in order to be ready for the accession even more than others. And I'm going to give out a secret. We want to be ready to really work with European donors and investors who will understand that in Zakarpattia their money will be living in the conditions that are, well, as close to the ones in the EU as possible, or at least the ones they are accustomed to. That's why, though this topic is global, it's also important for us here in Uzhhorod. So that's why let's start discussing this topic, and thank you, dear panelists, for joining us, and thank you to all those people who have been joining in our work within this topic throughout the year. I've got a general question, which is not being addressed to the panelists, but oh, by the way, I can see that Yaroslav is joining us. I had a long introductory speech just for him to be able to join us and for Yaroslav to really hear all the questions that I'm going to give to all the panelists. So now quite often we use the word integrity, and it sometimes seems to me that we are trying to replace the word anti-corruption with the word integrity, because anti-corruption is a term which we've been using for quite a period of time. It's a little bit toxic, and civil servants don't want to respond to this word positively, while the word integrity is highly positive. So you don't have to answer this question right now. This is just the general question to direct us through our panel. Are we not trying to mask, to disguise, to camouflage the word anti-corruption with the word integrity? And are these words antonyms or synonyms? And let me put it this way. We understand that you cannot be a man of integrity and a corrupt person at the same time, but you can be not a corrupt man, but not being a man of integrity, because you don't take bribes, but you are not a man of integrity. And I really like the explanation of this term coming from the National Agency for Corruption Prevention. They say that integrity is if you do your work in a good way, even if nobody sees it. Well, maybe I'm not quoting in the right way, but that's a very clear explanation of the notion of integrity. So that is the basic general issue just for the whole panel. And now let me ask you the following questions. My question is for Frans Geraedts. We are working with him within our project on the enhancement of the rule of law. We have been long acquainted with him. He's been long working in Ukraine, and he's got his vision of the development of this process in Ukraine probably for more than 15 years. And my question, Frans, to you is as follows. Over these 15 years, have you seen any changes? What kind of changes do you see? What is Ukraine doing in the right way? What Ukraine is doing in the wrong way? And not just Ukraine, but Zakarpattia region, because you've been working with it. And what do we have to do to squeeze it all within the shortest timeline and to get as close to the standards of integrity, anti-corruption and good governance that they have in the EU? I don't mean specifically the Netherlands, but at least the countries that are our neighbors. What do we have to do to reach those standards? So this is a question for you.
Very quickly then, right? Lots to say in 5 minutes. First, when it comes to the development of Ukraine in these, I will not only speak about these 17 years that I've been working in Ukraine, but you have to look at the development since 90, when you first, as a people, achieved statehood in a stable manner and could develop. And what you have achieved in these 30 years is amazing. It's without precedent. The Netherlands took an 80-year wars of independence. That's not 18, it's 80. And then it took about 150 years to build democratic institutions. What you have achieved in 35 years is amazing. And it's not people like me, and also not the people sitting here doing that. If you look at the history of Ukraine since 90, first you have this enormous movement that ended up in the referendum, this refusal to continue being a part of the Soviet Union that actually ended the Soviet Union. It was the Ukraine doing that. Then you had the Orange Revolution. Then you had 2014. And then you defeated the second strongest army in the world, because you already did that. And you defeated it as a society, because that was what I wanted to say to you. While I completely understand this thinking in terms of army and society, but look at yourself. You volunteered. You are this society. It's this society that is fighting and winning. Democracies, usually, if they get in this kind of war, have to mobilize after 2 months. You needed to mobilize after 2 years. That does never happen. Why? Because so many of you volunteered. So, when it comes to anti-corruption, the same story. You inherited corruption. It was a totalitarian inheritance. Because corruption under totalitarian circumstances is survival. That's it. Then you enter the market economy, called Turkey. We told you to do that. And that ended up in oligarchic structures. Guaranteed. So on top of what was a totalitarian inheritance, you got top-level oligarchic corruption. Thank you very much. And that completed the system. And every normal business had to engage in corruption to be able to exist. So that's where you started. This is, let's say, 2000. That's the situation. There is corruption on all levels. But the citizens, once again, society has been fighting against this corruption from the beginning. And it is winning. Like my colleague said, if you look, international standards, you are in many aspects, when it comes to anti-corruption, the best in the world. There is nothing like the declarations, anywhere. There is nothing like Prozoro, anywhere. Things like Naboo and the courts, and some places have those, but only a few. If you look at the civil society and the strength it has in fighting corruption, this is one of the strongest civil societies in the world. In 2014, it was the civil society that drove out one of the most corrupt presidents in the world, that was selling you actively to Russia. And you stopped that. So, you have to really see what you already achieved and how fast that went. Now, next steps, because as also the ambassador said and my colleague said, that doesn't mean we're already there, right? Because we all know that corruption is still everywhere, right? So citizens are fighting this, and we're building structures to fight this that actually are world-class, but it's still there everywhere. If you look at the quality of the structures and then look at the effect they have, that is very disappointing. Now, there are several reasons for that. I have only 5 minutes, so I cannot list them all. I'm going only to list one of the reasons. And then we come to integrity. Now, for many people, the word integrity is indeed a kind of camouflage, right? So we have a nice new word to use, right? And we can talk about that and blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah, blah. But actually, integrity is very practical. And you have to think about it as an integrity system. An integrity system that has to exist in every government organization. And I'll come back to that. That is the key. It's internal. It's in the government institution itself. It has 4 tasks. Not 1, but 4. It investigates and punishes. It prevents. How does it prevent, actually? Nothing of this is rocket science. Also very, very important to understand. Nothing about integrity is rocket science. This is all common sense. So how do you prevent violations? By creating work processes that make, for example, corruption more difficult, right? So why does digitalization almost always work against corruption? Because it takes out possibilities to be corrupted, right? So it's this basic kind of stuff, prevention. So, first of all, they investigate and punish. Second, they prevent through reorganizing the way work is done. Third element, that is what most people associate with integrity. You work on the ethos, on how civil servants see themselves. In the Netherlands, it's always difficult to believe for people in Ukraine, but in government, there is no corruption. Listen to me. There is no corruption. In the Netherlands, you can be a business, you can have a business, and throughout your whole life, you will not be confronted by corruption at all. You can be a citizen, and all through your life, you will not encounter corruption. Why is that? What is the decisive moment in this? It's very, very simple. Every civil servant in the Netherlands is disgusted just by the idea of taking a bribe. It's literally a physical sensation. So in the Netherlands, try it, go to the Netherlands and try to go to a civil servant and give him 50 euros. You won't believe it. What will happen? The only thing that will happen is you will get in prison. That's it. Nothing else will happen. Because on a personal level, on a level of his identity and professional pride, he is disgusted even by the idea. So that's the third task, ethos. And the fourth task is learning. You also need to learn stuff, of course. So you need an integrity system that is on the inside of every government organization that does 4 things. Investigate and punish, prevent by changing working processes, work on the ethos of the civil service, and there is learning around all of this necessary. So all of this is practical, all of this is common sense. It's not something, up there, vague, deep, idealistic. No, 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 no. This is all very practical, and it needs professionals. For all these 4 tasks, you need people that are capable, right? Okay. Last remark, where I am in the minutes? Probably close to 5, right? Maybe even over. Last remark. If you want to successfully fight corruption, you actually need 3 things. And you already have 2. So you fight corruption, first of all, through criminal law. People that are corrupt have to be punished in the sense of being put in prison. Okay. On the other side, you need transparency. And what that does actually mean is you need to make it possible for civil society to pressure. So civil society has to be able to look into government and then pressure. Okay. You have both. What you don't have is the third in the middle, and that is integrity. What you don't have is inside government organizations this agency that works to transform that government organization itself. You're missing that. That is underdeveloped in Ukraine. That's what we need to do in the coming 10 years. Last remark, I'm going to be very specific about corruption, because integrity is about all kinds of violations, not just corruption. But about corruption, you have one huge, big hole in the anti-corruption system as it is, and integrity systems solves this. Think. NABU is arresting people at the top by law. That means the people on the middle and lower levels of government, NABU isn't doing nothing. Supposedly the police should do that. And I underline supposedly, because in reality the police is not doing that. Not willing, not capable. Integrity solves this. Not that we can put these people in prison, but we can simply fire them. And wouldn't that be an enormous progress? If you are the manager of a government organization, and you know to a high level of probability that that guy or woman is in a corrupt scheme, that you at least can get rid of him. Okay, thank you.
Дякую, пане професоре.
Thank you very much, Mr. Professor. Yeah, almost 5 minutes. And I will provide short comment. Within the framework of our project on the enhancement of the rule of law, we have monthly meetings with the lawyers and representatives of local authorities. And, well, when we hear these statements, everybody starts talking about labor legislation that dates back to the 1970s, and it's very difficult to dismiss a person. The professor all the time says that do not use the outdated legislation, create new tools, and I'm sure that we'll be able to do it. So that was a very short remark. And right now I would like to give the floor to Viktor Pavlushchyk, and at the same time I would tell all the panelists, if you want to respond, to provide some comments to the previous speaker, just give me a signal and I'll give you the opportunity. Well, Mr. Viktor, NACP now is working a lot at the community level, studies the best practices, and we have been witnessing you are very active for the recent years. At the same time, in Ukraine, there have been launched a number of initiatives, for example, anti-corruption initiative of the EU that also covers the regional level. I'm talking also about our project that is implemented in Transcarpathian region. So, in our opinion, in your opinion, I have actually two questions here. Is it does it yield good results? And do you see how these initiatives help develop the communities or the regions? How such projects give the growth points to the regions? And what is practical advantage regarding implementation of such initiatives or projects? Thank you. Thank you for the question. First of all, Zakarpattia has become the 12th region, and definitely the answer to your question is yes, there is effect. And this communication is about building dialogues with the local authorities, proactive civil society, society in general. And here I would like to voice a number of aspects of our activities. For example, yesterday we signed the integrity declarations with the city mayor of Uzhhorod. Before we had signed the same declaration with Zakarpattia Regional Council. This is definitely a document of declarative nature, but it signals the willingness of local authorities to lead by example and to use the best practices developed by our agency in their activities. Yesterday I was asked the question, is it an inspection? I said, no, it's not an inspection. We came to establish and to build up a dialogue. Now we try to elaborate and develop the best practices that the regions can use in their activities. I have been talking about it in my speech. Corruption starts with each and every of us, in the same way as fighting corruption is also about each and every of us. So we have to hear different people. Lots of projects are actually aimed at developing and enhancing integrity. And I think our professor has already stress the point that integrity is much broader than just fighting corruption, because integrity is about all areas of life. Well, in NACP, we just do not work in a good way, but act in a good way. And again, it's not only about civil servants; it's about all the people working in different government and state institutions. We suggest our products not only to local authorities, but also, for example, we deal with certain educational projects. Yesterday we had a meeting with representatives of educational establishments. For example, we have such program as Transparent School, Transparent University, and we already have certain materials that are integrated into university curricula or, for example, as a separate subject at school. We also have lots of materials on fighting corruption that may be used by teachers at different classes, starting with mathematics or any other lesson. And here I would also use this opportunity and probably comment the statement about our distinguished professor about totalitarian inheritance. Yes, corruption was inherited by ours, but I would stress that it is not our inheritance, and we have to do whatever we can in order not to pass it on to the next generations. And I think that our society is able to do it. Thank you. Well, I'm just thinking that it's not everyday opportunity to talk to a distinguished professor and to the head of an NACP. So could you please give the honest answer? Just not the way you should answer, but the way you think, please. Well, the function of the National Agency on Preventing Corruption in your opinion, is more about control and inspection, and catching those who lack integrity, who, for example, have not indicated something in the assets declaration, because, well, we have lots of people who have to submit these assets declarations. Or your function is more about prevention and help. We had a talk in August in your agency, and at that time I said that we, for example, as civil servants, would like to see your agency as a partner who will probably prompt us what can be done rather than a punishing agency. So once again, what do you like more? To investigate, to find and to punish, or to find and help? Definitely not a tough question regarding particularly the background of law enforcement activities. Well, to identify, to investigate is fine. There is some romantic idea behind it, but I want to say that fighting corruption is possible only if we apply comprehensive measures. And here I would probably look at it from the practical point of view and will provide specific examples. Yes, assets declarations are important, and checking them is important, and holding people liable is important. Prevention is also important. These are certain strategic things. We have anti-corruption strategies, state anti-corruption program, which are aimed at specific changes, at reforms in each and every area of our life. For example, there are most affected areas of life. So state anti-corruption program has more than 1,000 measures that are supposed to be implemented by about 110 state authorities all over Ukraine. And Mr. Professor has mentioned Prozoro, but we also have DIA system, and there are a number of other IT products. And these are very good examples of both transparency and removing a person from those administrative acts. And if a person doesn't have any discretion, it means there are no opportunities for corruption. So this is a comprehensive approach that will allow us to get rid of this totalitarian heritage and will ensure that we give our country to the next generation, which is well developed, which is democratic, honest, and which is the member of the EU. I see that Mr. Professor would like to respond. You have just 1 minute.
So first of all, I'm not a professor. It must be my hair. It always happens. And something in my speech, maybe. So I'm a philosopher. But I'm not a professor. I'm working in reality, not in academics. Like in the regional administration of Uzhgorod or in the municipality of Amsterdam, or I'm now working with the government of Bangladesh, or right? So I'm a scholar practitioner, right? To make that clear. Now, where we all, I think, are in agreement is that to fight corruption, you cannot do one thing. That will not work. You need to do a lot of things at the same time. You have to, so to speak, overload the corrupt system because it adapts. So if you do only one thing, it simply shifts. So we need to overload the system. What I also want to underline is what my colleague says. I had the Ukrainian translation in my ear. It's a bit complex. So what I also want to underline is this idea that we need to see this as strategic. So we need to really begin to think about where are the vital elements of this system and how can we break them down? What priorities? What sequences? We need to learn to think like that. And last point, when you think about the strategic level, you also need to learn to think in the form of campaigns, where you, not just the agencies are working, but the citizens and the business communities are working, right? So here in Zakarpattia, everything I've learned is about the land, actually, right? This is all about ecology, right? And this is about borders. So if we don't break the corruption in customs, and if we don't break the corruption around the illegal deforestation, we will not succeed in Transcarpathian. We need to learn to think about anti-corruption on that deep strategic level.
Thank you very much. Mr. Frans is talking about customs because he's from Limburg region and there are 3 borders in that region, and therefore he knows pretty well what it means to live in the area where there are 3 borders. Miss Ruslana, we have been talking about Europe, we have been talking about Kyiv, but my question to you is to a person who has been working for many years in the state service. You have occupied many positions, different positions, and I have known you for at least several years, and I know that you have your own specific attitude to the questions we discuss here. I don't know whether you will mention everything you think, but, well, the first question to you is what should be done here in Zakarpattia and what should be done in Ukraine in general, and how do you evaluate the real condition of anti-corruption situation and integrity issues? And we have already mentioned that it's a broad issue and it covers lots of people. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this great event where we can exchange our ideas. The issue of corruption, fighting corruption and integrity is actually something I take very personally because I have been working all my life in state authorities, local authorities, and when people discuss corruption at the level of state authorities or local authorities, to some extent I consider it personally, and therefore my colleague has mentioned that I have my personal vision of it. Well, you have been working every day. There are people who are behind you, who look at you as the role model, and who also try to work in an honest way, in a transparent way, irrespective of the conditions we have had in the past and we have now. It seems to me that we probably overuse these notions of integrity, corruption, and fighting corruption. So we've brought everything into one pile. We have to clearly understand that corruption is a penal action, a criminal thing. Anti-corruption is a system of measures in place that is adopted by the state in the form of bylaws, in the form of different institutions, state authorities, law enforcement authorities, etc. And these are measures aimed at fighting corruption. And there is a different category, which is integrity. I think that this integrity cannot be put alongside corruption, because once again, corruption is something that is punished in a criminal way. Yes, we have inherited it, but we have inherited it not only from the Soviet Union. When we generally think about humanity and the history of humanity, I think that this heritage of conformity has been present since the beginning of the human civilization. People were thinking that they depend on God, Later, they were talking about the chief tribes, etc. And then the state institutions have been formed in the same way. And this idea of dependency and conformity is still from those times. So when we consider the issue of integrity, I definitely support what the previous speakers have said. It should be developed and present in all the areas of our life. So this idea of integrity, this idea should be how you live in this society, what attitude is to what you do, and how you treat other people.
But taking into account this long history from which it all originated, we now need to really raise the question of bringing up elements of integrity, bringing up our children in the spirit of integrity. Since we've got some legacy in our minds, we inherited something from our parents, we inherited something from the previous managers and leaders, but that cannot be eradicated at the click of the button. And now attention should be paid to our children. That's what I think, because each of us can actually ask himself or herself a question: am I a man or a woman of integrity? And integrity is not just about doing the right things at your workplace, but in your life as well. Because are we people of integrity when we are going to the election? I'm sure that all those sitting in this room, while they think about this question, will give the answer that no, I'm not a man of integrity because I didn't go to the election. Because, well, everything seems to be settled there without me. That is already lack of integrity because we are not engaged in the progress and the changes and social life and all the other changes related to that. Was I a man of integrity when I went to the doctor? Because, the doctor didn't ask me to give something, but I gave him some sweets because that's our tradition. Was I a man of integrity? No, I wasn't. So that is a really tremendous layer of different ethical, social, and other dimensions and issues we should focus on. And if we really want our children to create a different society, we need to put our effort into them and invest into their upbringing at the level of a kindergarten and school, and we should be a sample to follow. While anti-corruption and corruption are the things that special bodies will deal with on the basis of legislation, that is already a punitive function dealing with the eradication of this negative element in our life, unfortunately. Thank you, Ruslana. I've just jotted down some of the things that you mentioned as statements, and I'm really not trying to do some mockery or to offend anyone, but you've made this excursion into the long history, and worshipping could also be treated as a form of corruption in relation to the ancient gods. Yet, yes, and Judas' bribery is also a corruptive act. So all the stages of our lives and our history were followed by corruption. If we go deep into history, it appears that it's pointless to fight corruption because it's endless. But I don't think that our conclusion should be like this. Well, of course, we should be trying to eradicate corruption, but maybe we should care more not about eradication, but about cherishing the elements of integrity in our children. Yes, I fully agree with your statement about our children. I wouldn't give any specific examples, but not to take too much of your time. But I really, when started working with this topic on an ongoing basis, I saw that even my personal behavioral norms changed at the routine level. They really changed, and when I feel that there is some temptation and to do something, well, I already think that, okay, I'm accustomed to doing it like this, but I can do it in the right way. So that happens. I will not give you any specific examples, though I know what I have in mind now, but that definitely affects everyone, and that's definitely something that we should do, and probably that is an idea for the next phase of our project, that we should work not just with civil servants, but with younger citizens of our country. I actually prepared a question related to integrity. You know, corruption engages at least two sides. But what about integrity? Does it refer to a one-way street? Is it related to civil servants only, because we are now mainly focusing on civil servants? But it seems that it's not quite true, because all the speakers keep saying that integrity refers to all citizens, and this example of election is a very good example. We participate in the election as citizens, even if we do take. I'm not considering the option if we don't go to the election poll, but are we really people of integrity then? But now I would probably give the floor to Yaroslav. He has been introduced as an MP, but we love him not for him being an MP. Just before becoming a member of the parliament, Yaroslav, for many or several years at least, used to be a civil society activist dealing with anti-corruption at the time when it was still in vogue. And now he is already working in a different format, at a different place, has a different repertoire, and he has more opportunities to probably put into life the things that he voiced back then, or at least he can see what has worked, what has not worked. That's why I will not have any special question, but you know, you have changed your stance, you have changed your position, and you understand what the current situation in Ukraine now is. So could you make a short analysis of the things that we have been mentioning here, and could you express your point of view regarding how Ukraine should be developing in the context of its approximation to the EU standards on its path to the European integration? Because it seems that it's no longer questionable for us whether we need it or not. This is not just paying tribute to the fashion. That is a pure need in the context of integrity and corruption. Yes, thank you for giving me the floor. We'll try to squeeze it all into 5 minutes, otherwise there will be no time left. So, first of all, not a single country has managed to fight corruption. We have corruption throughout the world. Corruption is always a way to fix a problem which otherwise would be difficult to fix. That's why this main statement is that integrity is really good governance, which is built in the way that you don't have to take extra effort in the situations where they would not be needed. Has Ukraine made progress in this respect? Yes, definitely. But, well, can we now tell that in the nearest years we will reach the standards that would guarantee this relationship, business, citizen, and state, being like a golden partnership? Well, most probably yes, otherwise we will just not survive. Otherwise we will not become members of the European community, and we will not survive in this war. So this is the matter of civilization survival. But do we want to make this happen? No, because people always want to stay within their comfort zones. And our task, as the task of the state, is to make our system of good governance clear and comfortable. There will be a subjective personal factor there, but it will not be critically affecting the decision-making process. And why I'm still in this fight for against corruption? Because the guarantee of the freedom of speech, the ability to have yourself heard, is also a part of anti-corruption. Because if there are some people in the society who are not included into the decision-making process, it's all about lack of justice. And these people have to engage some other mechanisms to settle the issues that are related to them. So it's like smuggling, some illegal ways. And corruption gets globalized. And suppose we go back to the legal system of the US, to what Musk did, and the legal system of the US says that this is not bribery, that it's just one of the forms to engage our voters in the election process. And it's a really difficult issue to handle. This is just an ongoing process. We are developing, corruption is developing. We have invented electronic declarations, e-tax returns, and already back there appeared 72 ways to evade the needs for declaring, because whatever a person creates is possible to evade. There will be AI, there will be some people who are sly, they will make some inquiries that will help them to find out how to evade something. Well, there are some critical things that we lack because of the war and the current political situation, and unfortunately I don't think that these issues will be settled in the nearest future. So the first thing I have to mention in this context is not even decentralization, but giving the levers of management and leadership to the grassroots level, to the level of municipalities. People are probably not that well aware of how the geopolitics, well, the monetary policy is being established. I've just come back from the US, but you see, people in the US were not that concerned about the results of voting in the US. We were mainly concerned about that. That's why, to wrap up, I would like to say that if we're just trying to fight corruption, we will not, we will just have this punitive function. But anyway, there will be some mistakes, there will be some problems. But if we want to make the mechanisms for providing comfortable services to our citizens, otherwise, if we want quick solutions, well, we need to just ensure sustainable development in the country. Because, a good thing is supposed to mature. And, I'm an archaeologist by my first degree. That's why we want very much to have a leap forward and to jump over that evolutionary stage the countries were taking for many years within just a very short period of time. But it's not possible. We need to settle some issues with local governance, with the quality of people whom we are ready to engage as civil servants, because we have now created a lot of anti-motivators for civil service. So nobody wants to become a civil servant now. There are no motivating factors. So we need to reconsider the system of creating and establishing our civil service. We are doing something, but do we get the result that we would like to have? Probably not. If we are just fighting corruption, that's not enough. Anti-corruption is an element of strategic improvement of the state. Anti-corruption will definitely deal with prevention, which is the mandate of NACP. But journalists normally ask how many people have been imprisoned on the basis of your materials, and this is what the expectation is. Were it not for the war, we would have done even better. But anyway, we have made a lot of things, a lot of progress. But we don't have any other option. We will definitely win, and we will fight corruption. I'm sure of that. Thank you. So the statement about journalists has reminded me about our yesterday briefing, because we were asked about the number of corrupt people who were caught red-handed in the Zakarpattia region. So really we do have this inquiry, this demand, and it's very good that we are scrutinizing all those aspects in detail, because it seems to me that we cannot have any bright colors here. We just need to understand that everything should work as a comprehensive whole. And Frans has also mentioned that there is no magic wand, there is no panacea recipe, there should be a comprehensive set of measures taken. And here is my question to all of our panelists. What are the aspects that are probably critical for good governance, for honest governance, for integrity? What specific things should be done? I understand that you have already mentioned some of the specific actions. I hope that I will further scrutinize all your statements later after the panel is over, because you have mentioned a lot of very interesting things. But what are the critical aspects that we need as the country and as the region? Any specific things that we can do to get this good governance or better governance? That can be something related to staff, to procedures, to decision-making processes, any specific pieces of advice. You can just take turns. Let me start because I've got the mic. So first of all, that is really all about strategic thinking. Here and now, we can already loosen the symptoms. We cannot eradicate the disease. That's why there should be definitely a comprehensive set of actions containing the elements of facilitation of the decision-making process, transparency, accountability, civil society engagement. There should be a comprehensive set of actions. And unfortunately, the politicians are ready to give a lot of empty promises, and then they just provide invalid excuses why they failed to. And this is a barrier in our way. Why did we try to make anti-corruption infrastructure as independent as possible? Because the demand is not how many management processes were improved on the basis of the anti-corruption strategy. No, journalists are going to ask you about the amount of money repaid. So anyway, you will have to report on this. And that's why we don't just lack anti-corruption, we also lack the processes of mobilization, and we lack a clear and sincere talk, because, war is one thing. We can stay in war, but it cannot be as an excuse. And we need to explain to our citizens that we should not be proud of the fact that we imprison 2 or 3 ministers. The Persian emperor generally punished a lot of people, torturing them for thefts, for embezzlement. But it's not the rigidity and harshness of punishment that will fix the problem. We will need to change we have actually changed the processes, and there will be no need for punishment. This is the main achievement. That's why we first of all have to face our civil society and to explain it to our civil society residents that it's not just about punishment. It's difficult, but I think that some of those messages are helpful, and they help NACP to explain that our result is the 5-year implementation of the strategy that we developed. Thank you, Frans.
Yes, so 3 things. I completely agree with my colleague. The effectivity of government is the most important thing if you want to prevent corruption. The government has to be effective and efficient. Then second, when it comes to, and I said that before, so I just touch on it. When it comes to then, if government is effective, fight corruption, because it will still be there, then you need this 1, 2, 3 approach. You need transparency and civil society pushing. You need criminal law that can punish, and you need this integrity that works inside the government institutions. You need all 3. And then it is very important to understand that this integrity is not just punishment. It's punishment, it's prevention, it's ethos and learning. And you need all 4. And indeed, that is also something that the media have to understand. They have to understand the process of reducing corruption. So the media should be, for example, ecstatic that we find more corrupt people. They should all understand that that is an enormous progress. Instead of saying, it's getting worse in the country because we find more corrupt people. No, it's getting better. But they also should understand that finding corrupt people and punishing them is only this last piece. That it's much more effective, actually, that you've digitalized a lot of processes through which now corruption is impossible. And that means that the media also have to report about that. Now, last thing I wanted to say, and that is this question that my colleague here talked about. Corruption is universal, right? Yeah, totally true. Till about 300 years ago. No, that's the reality. Since modernity started, we've been effectively fighting corruption. Before we couldn't. And the secret of that is democratic nations. They are capable of fighting corruption. Non-democratic nations are not capable of fighting corruption, but democratic nations can. Tragedy of Ukraine, it is only 35 years a democratic nation. So it's still very difficult to believe that it is possible to fight corruption. Now, one last remark. The real big change is the war itself. Now, during war, corruption goes up. Always. There is no exception in world history. During the war, after the war, if the war has been fought by a democratic nation, corruption goes down. And if we do it right, radically down. And what is causing that? And that are the dead are causing that. All these Ukrainians that have died in this war. Because all of the survivors, and that is everybody who didn't die in this war, has become a survivor because of this war. Everybody that survives has to answer for the rest of their lives to these dead people. What? I died, and you are still continuing this? That is going to be the big change. Politicians that do not understand this will be destroyed after the war.
Thank you, Frans. Then I will ask our next panelist to speak just for 1 minute, because we are pressed for time. I think that the results of the work of the authorities, and by the authorities here I mean local self-government and executive authorities in Zakarpattia region, over the period when war broke out. So what we can see here is a number of relocated businesses and educational institutions that have moved here and that now work from Zakarpattia. And here I would like to point out the role of territorial communities in those processes, because our territorial communities have really done their best to create favorable conditions for relocated businesses, for placement of internally displaced people, and for fixing all those problems and arranging all those processes that can be arranged only at the grassroots level of local administration. That's why I think that in spite of the fact of everything, in spite even of the war that is going on in our country, we still need to continue with the process of decentralization to have it completed. And we need to create proper material and technical inventory bases for the work of our territorial communities, because then they will be able to implement the projects that they are supported by their communities and that they think to be important. So that is a practical recommendation. Let's complete the decentralization process. And here is another one, which I cannot but mention. ongoing reform in our civil service has really led to the situation when young people are just not willing to become civil servants. Of course, there are a number of underlying factors behind that, in particular the pressure related to declarations, higher level of responsibility of civil servants working in executive authorities, and salaries. Of course, salaries, low salaries. We just have to understand that if we want to have effective governance, it should be supported with adequate staff. And our territorial communities have to become full-fledged local administration, while local executive authorities like local state administrations, regional state administrations have to become the facilitators, the managers of the processes in a specific region. Thank you. In spite of our talk on the same stage half a year ago in May, now while listening to you, I felt really much pleased, because you probably remember Andriy was present here. You heard that discussion, so I feel pleased that you claim that we need to keep going with the decentralization process to have it completed. Viktor, just 1 minute for our facilitators still to be able to tell a couple of words. Yes, I will try to be quick. And let me express my gratitude to Yaroslav, because he has made a lot of comments which I actually wanted to voice. He said that a comprehensive set of actions and strategic decisions will lead to positive results. And as far as the strategy is concerned, I would say that we do have the National Anti-Corruption Program, which aims to fix the problems that we are discussing today, presupposes creation or modernizing of 63 digital products in Ukraine. And digitalization is really a very good way of minimizing corruption risks in the state authorities. I think that this is one of the major ways to fight corruption. And the other thing I would like to mention is availability of clear rules of the game. We had a chance to have some communication with you regarding football and application of digital means and devices there. So, it's better to play football if you know what the rules of the game are. We need to implement the reforms in all the fields to minimize the discretion of civil servants in some issues. We also need to identify a specific timeline for the decision making, because it's also about clear rules of the game. Otherwise, people will try to find some quick roundabout ways of fixing their problems. And also, let me mention that when we have those clear rules of the game, other things will come. The most demanded things will come. This is like irreversibility of punishment, because we have the demand from our population for irreversible and quick punishment. And our agency has just developed the draft law to prevent any abuse of procedural law during court hearings. Of course, we focus on corrupt cases, but that will also enable us to get the results quicker, because the average timeline for 2022 was 7 years. It took 7 years to bring someone to account. And I'm not mentioning just high-profile cases which were left with no court decisions. Thank you. We still have just several minutes for some comments, and we have got several people who are supposed to comment what they have heard during this panel. As far as I understand, Zoltán Babják, the town mayor of Berehove, is supposed to have a couple of words. Yes, thank you for giving me the chance to speak. Dear panelists, let me first of all speak about my small territorial community in Berehove district. Our town, Berehove, has just 40,000 of residents, but we have always been engaged in different political discourses, political discussions, and I've been listening to you very attentively. My task is actually adapt what you are saying to the conditions where I'm working. So I heard it from Frans, and I would like to stress this. He said 150 years ago that actually this fight started, anti-corruption fight started. Well, our state is just 33 years old. Not everything has been done, of course. We are going along a clear line, and what is happening now at the national level is really hopeful. It's good from the strategic point of view, and I'm really grateful to the management of NACP, because the conditions that we currently have are absolutely different from what we had about 8 or 10 years ago. The investment attractiveness of Berehove and of Zakarpattia region and of Ukraine in general really depends on how ready we are to defend the anti-corruption interests of our investors. I wouldn't be willing to have any talk with investors when he's asking me about the problems he may have in case the authorities in the region, in the town, change. That should definitely not affect our relations with the investors. They have to pay taxes ahead of time. And I think that we are going in the right direction, slowly but steadily. And, well, probably we are still not quite conscious of the fact that we want to live in the anti-corruption state. I mean, we want to live in the anti-corruption state, but we are not quite clear about all the elements of this state. But we are moving in the right direction, and our striving is to get, after the war, the country where we could do the planning. And thank you, Ruslana, for mentioning the prospects of work of territorial communities. It's really true that in the future communities should undertake the maximum responsibility for fulfillment and implementation of different programs. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you. And Volodymyr, let me give the floor to you. Yes, good afternoon to everyone. I would also like to express my gratitude to you for having me here and for giving me the floor. I don't know whether it's going to be the question or just a comment. I like the most the idea mentioned by Ruslana. Maybe that's because we are holding similar positions and we are lawyers by background. And I would like to stress that corruption or anti-corruption is fighting against some illegal actions, actions that are a crime. That could be eternal fight. It's really true. Well, in China, they are still killing people for embezzlement. We don't have such approach. It has been mentioned today that we need to bring up young people in kindergartens, in schools. We need to lay down the right foundations and the right values for them to act on. Unfortunately, my impression, maybe it's erroneous, but my impression is that as far as corruption is concerned, our society has been divided into two camps. Corrupt people who unfortunately include all those who submit their declarations. Somehow people think that all those who submit declarations, they are corrupt people. And that's why young people don't want to become civil servants, not to be associated with corruption. And the second camp is those who are fighting corruption. But we don't have this category of people who just work for the good of the country, who are people of integrity. But this third camp, this third category, should be created on the basis of our young generation, because good governance could be something you do, you die, you don't take the money with you, but the reputation, good reputation of the person who has been acting in favor of the state, for the good of the state, will still be there, even for your children. So that's why let me mention the case. We had it 2 years ago. That was a case when we well, people told us that at one of our enterprises there was a conflict of interest, and they asked us to regulate this conflict of interest. The law doesn't have anything about the resolution of this conflict of interest. We addressed the NACP, and a month later the police came to take the explanations because the NACP went to the police trying to ask to investigate into this case. So we were looking for the mechanism to scrutinize all those problems and investigate into those problems. It would be better if the NACP was trying not to punish someone, but was trying to prevent something. Yes, you used the occasion to address the NACP. They know this example. We have been talking about this case with them. Dear panelists, thank you for your participation in this discussion. I hope that each of you has learned some lessons from it. Thank you.